Okay, so I heard there's a new Sonic game coming out. Oh, that's great and everything, but oh wait, there are no SEGA characters? You have got to be fucking kidding me. Oh hey folks, it's me, Azel98 here. And it has been a long time. I wanted to do this list for quite a while, believe it or not. Yeah. SEGA is making a new Sonic racing game. However, they are not going to add any SEGA characters, which is a darn fucking shame. Because I have been a SEGA fan since 1997. Even though I love Sonic the Hedgehog, it wasn't the character that got me into video games. That was almost close. But it was the main company that shouted out his name when I first played the first game. Yes, that's right, it's SEGA. And without this company, I haven't been an avid video gamer in a long time. And it's a darn shame that this new Sonic game ain't gonna branch out to other SEGA franchises. Which is kinda odd because, you know, Sonic Riders had some SEGA characters that were special unlockable. And when I didn't recognize Knights a little bit, maybe except for his Sonic Adventure cameo, but the other two just blew my mind. Ooh La La and Ah. And then when I played the SEGA inspired track from Sonic Riders, that almost opened my eyes what SEGA is about, other than Sonic the Hedgehog. And when Sonic All-Stars Racing came along as the official crossover racing game, that really got me to appreciate SEGA more often. And you know, Sumo Digital, they respect old school SEGA than us fans, of course. It's like having a Super Smash Bros. Game without, it's like having a Super Smash Bros. Game, but only it was reduced to only Mario characters. No Zelda characters, no Metroid characters, not even obscure Nintendo franchises like Earthbound and Golden Sun. Now sure, Mario did do some genre hopping from time to time, but what makes Super Smash Bros. Great, despite it being an easy fighting game to pick up and play with a variety of moves and not over complex moveset, is that it was a crossover game between many Nintendo franchises. Now the first one was basic though, giving us the familiar characters with the untraditional two more that we weren't familiar, or franchises that are starting, like Ness from Earthbound and Captain Falcon from F-Zero, of course. But what made Smash Bros. Great is when the character roster grows big, we get to see all these other Nintendo characters that we never saw before. Trophies and playable characters like otherwise. Same thing can be said with SEGA. With Sonic All-Stars Racing, it had amazing characters or rosters, ranging from Ooh La La from Space Channel 5, Beat from Jet Set Radio, and Ryo Azuki from Shenmue. And even though the sequel, All-Stars Racing 2, then had a fantastic character roster, maybe except for Vibes from Skies of Arcadia, at least it had stage variety from different SEGA franchises, which got me into those franchises in the first place. I have been an avid video gamer since 1997, and I fucking love SEGA. Hell, back in 2010, the Sonic Colors event, I cosplay as Adam Hunter from Streets of Rage. Yeah, we can forget about that video. That's cringeworthy. That's 2010. I never look back. And hell, I changed my name from Bilal to SEGA Gamer because I want to make my channel dedicated to SEGA, because not only I'm a Sonic fan, I'm an avid SEGA gamer, and I want to show all these old school SEGA games that nobody has got to play Not only that, I changed my name to a Zell98 because Panzer Dragoon Saga freaking amazed me. I was gonna change my name to Ica 2000, but Skies of Arcadia was pretty close. I just think Panzer Dragoon Saga just took everything what RPGs should have been to the casual player, but yet again still being challenging. The Skies of Arcadia just expands upon it and made it even more original. So yeah, this is a Zone 98, and I'm gonna give you my top 7 SEGA developers. Because if it wasn't for these developers, we wouldn't have SEGA as we know today. Note, I am not counting any third-party companies like Data East or some Capcom games that were exclusively on the SEGA console. These companies had to have at least some history of SEGA or be affiliated with SEGA, from the Master System days all the way up to the SEGA Dreamcast days. So yeah, let's start this list. Coming in at number 7 is Digital Pictures. You may be wondering, Digital Pictures? Oh my god, they're the worst company in the world. Yeah, that's why I put them very low on the list. Digital Pictures, or Stargate Entertainment, or what I like to call one of the top Zito Productions, were the guys who made all those amazing but cheesy as fuck FMV games for the Sega CD. I will admit, even though the Sega CD didn't do so well, if it wasn't for Digital Pictures, it would have gotten gamers at least curious, or at least, strive to play the consoles. Even though some of their games were published by Sony, most of them were affiliated by Sega. Case in point, Night Trap, Midnight Raiders, and Surgical Strike, which all came out in the early to mid-90s. Now, Digital Pictures was found in somewhat, say, the late 80s by Tom Zito. He wanted to make, let's say, games more interactive than just the static 8-bit 2D stuff. However, though, the NES was very limited, and of course, you had to use laser video, which was hard to program. So when Sega made their Sega CD and approached him, they made Night Trap a launch title, and look at that, that game had a success. It was so popular that the AVGN mentioned in his Sega CD video of this overlook. Not only that, the game had a remake. That's how damn good it is. And eventually, we're gonna get Double Switch as a remake. And that's how damn good that game is cheesy. It does have Sergeant Purities, so you know it's gonna be good. Well, anyway, Digital Pictures basically made a bunch of FMV games. However, though, most of the games were uncensored, especially that most infamous shower scene of Night Trap, which pretty much during the time got the censors rolling, and just like how Madeline Stroder had to censor Sonic, yeah, pretty much this game started the RSB rating, besides Mortal Kombat. Heck, even Nintendo's lawyer, Lincoln Kirby, was actually going to sue both Sega and Digital Pictures. The only reason why they're low on the list is because their games may be cheesy as hell, but I don't really play them, and most of their games are trial and error. If you ever play games like Wirehead, you know what I'm talking about. Not only that, the company sort of went downhill during the beginning of the Sega Saturn. The reason is that Digital Pictures sort of went bankrupt when the Sega CD wasn't selling too well towards the beginning of the mid-90s, towards the end of its lifespan, and they had to focus on the 32X and eventually Sega Saturn. They did make a football Sega Saturn game called Quarterback Football. However, though, that didn't sell too well, unlike the massive library of games that Digital Pictures has been known for. So yeah, Digital Pictures is number 7 on the list. Coming in at number 6 is Working Designs. Yes, the same people who made those Lunar games, all those fantastic RPGs during the Sega Saturn lifespan. Unlike, let's say, Digital Pictures, these companies tried, created founder Victor Island, of course. Working Designs started slow, and he started to work with Hudson Soft on a couple games on their TurboGrafx 16. However, when let's say the beginning of the 90s started, Digital Pictures wanted to quote-unquote expand what games could do during the time. So they hitched a deal with Sega to make games on their console, not only adding FMV cutscenes and voice acting. They wanted to show to the world that they could make high-quality games and FMV cutscenes at the same time with amazing gameplay. Borrowed from the hills of Cosmic Fantasy II, Digital Pictures took what made Cosmic Fantasy II great, and they wanted to expand upon it by releasing Lunar, the Eternal Blue. I meant to say the Silver Story. I always get those titles confused. Sorry about that. The Silver Story, and basically that what made the standard of RPGs so unique and new and more original than most standard RPGs, which were just static, 2D, and plain. Yeah, the overfill was plain as well, but at least when you boot up the game, you get an anime-style centric cutscene and good gameplay to boot. And they expand upon it with games like Poplamel. Basically, the story is simple. It's just a bounty hunter trying to capture a bald-headed sorcerer to stop him from taking over the world and revealing his master to her to destroy Bountyville. But the way that these games were presented by Working Designs, it was like they knew all the ropes, they knew all the references. Oh, and even Sonic makes a little cameo in Poplamel. At one point it was going to be a Sonic game, but it was canceled. And believe it or not, due to fan outcry, Poplamel was only going to be a third-party exclusive in Japan, but however, Working Designs basically led Sega to get it released in the States in the mid-90s, in fact, 1995. And since then, with the relationship and partnership with Sega, they started to make games on the Sega Saturn, started with Iron Storm, Dragon Force 1 and 2, Albert Odyssey, and most definitely Magic Knight Grave, which sadly is their last game. And during that time, they had to go somewhat third party with Sony and many other companies. That's only because of this motherfucking prick right here, Bernard Stoller. Basically, he said, fuck you, Victor Island, and basically said to him that, oh, RPGs aren't the norm for the Sega Saturn, which is bullshit, because the Sega Saturn had tons of RPGs compared to the PlayStation. So yeah, Working Designs is number 6. Coming in at number 5 is Treasure. Now, I consider Treasure to basically be like the HAL Laboratories to Sega. Now, Treasure is basically a company who was divided by ex-Konami developers who were sick and tired of making sequels and all these samey franchises at Konami for Nintendo and other consoles. So they start to branch off a little bit to work with other companies. One of them is Sega. And oh boy, they're in their heyday. It was amazing. Yeah, their first outing, the McDonald's game, was pretty crap, but their second outing, Gunstar Heroes, is a good Contra clone. In fact, it's the best Contra clone that's more original and unique and borrow some elements from the classic Mega Man days. I fucking love Treasure. Treasure is basically, they make games that are so sporadic, insane, wacky, imaginative, and amazing. Especially if you look at games like Dynamite Headdy. Oh, that game is all over the place. And the colors is amazing, and the aesthetic and the music. Yeah, Treasure, they did a lot of games on the Genesis. Alien Soldier, which basically takes the one-play beat-em-up gameplay mixed with some 2D platforming elements and some shooting elements, and it's hard as hell, of course. And then Light Crusader, which is okay, not as good as Landstalker, but I find it to be an okay isometric type of view action adventure game. And during the Sega Saturn days, they cranked up the level to 50 by giving us games like Guardian Heroes, which is a fantastic beat 'em up with a shit ton of RPG elements, amazing replay value, and fantastic stories, and of course Silhouette Mirage. I wish I could get into that game, but that game's only in Japanese. There is an American version, but it was made by Work Design, but that was published by a different developer and company altogether. And of course, the Dreamcast days, they stuck around with Sega with games like Ikarua and Bangolio and other games, of course. Surprisingly, Treasure is still making games for Sega, but sadly though, they're just Bleach games, and they're not all that original. Even though Treasure did work with various companies like Nintendo, they always stuck around with Sega, even its high points and low points, especially during the Genesis era. So yeah, Treasure is number 5 on the list. Coming in at number 4 is Overworks/Ancient. Pretty much Overworks/Ancient, I consider them to be like the intelligent systems of Sega. Just like Sonic Team back in the early 90s, these guys have been working with Sega since 1991. Their first works were the Streets of Rage trilogy, as we all know. Then after that, they worked on Skies of Arcadia, which is an amazing, underrated RPG, and he also worked on the Sakurai Tenshin Wars and the 2 3D Shinobi games on the PS2. Even games that weren't licensed by Sega, they did make a couple of games on the Saturn, like Vatlia, which is basically a overhead car battle simulator, and Car Battler Joe, which is basically a spin-off, which is published by both JVC and Natsu. If you hear the word Ancient and Overworks, they also have a famous composer who did Vatlia and Streets of Rage, and his name is Yuzo Koshiro, and he's very well famous in the composer chair of Sega besides Jun Sonoi. Overworks and Ancient is pretty much like my favorite Sega developers of around this list, but the only reason why they're low on the list is because A, they never do other genres, maybe except the RPG genre and the beat-em-up genre, and C, sadly though, if you're gonna get into Sakurai Warriors, prepare to learn a new native language, because that game is in Japanese for both the Saturn game and the Dreamcast game. The only English release we got was the 5th game that was released on the Wii. So yeah, Overworks/Ancient is number 4 on this list. Coming in at number 3 is Team Andromeda/Smilebit. I consider this company of Sega to be pretty much the Square Enix of back in the mid-90s, of course. This company is well known for making the Panzer Dragoon series, because this company is known for making AAA titles. And of course, during the Sega Saturn days, where there's barely no first-party Sega Saturn games made by Sega or third-party support, Team Andromeda kept on going. And even though these games are getting very expensive, especially Panzer Dragoon Saga, your money will be worth the cost because these games are very high quality, very fast-paced, and very innovative games. The first two games of the Panzer Dragoon series are just rail shooters, but I think it's better than Star Fox because A, unlike Star Fox where it takes place in ordinary space, the Panzer Dragoon series takes place in a Mobius Azarek-like style set in the post-apocalyptic world, mixed with the never-ending story, Terminator, and Blade Runner. And just like Skies of Arcadia, you play as a mercenary or ex-hunter who used to work for the Imperial Empire, and of course you gotta rebel just to save the world against a tower before they activate it, of course, against the evil 7th Emperor, which will be revealed in the third game. I freaking love this game series, and if it wasn't for this game series, Sega wouldn't have inspiration from this series, especially Panzer Dragoon Saga, to go ahead and make Skies of Arcadia for Overworks. Except, you know, instead of playing as a young naive mercenary, you play as a young naive pirate. But however, though, unlike Skies of Arcadia, Panzer Dragoon has a little bit more of an advantage because you get to play as cybernetic dragons, which not only they breathe fire, but they shoot freaking lasers. This isn't the only game series that they're known for. They're also known for making a triple grade B title, a cult classic, Jet Set Radio. And Jet Set Radio, I think, is even better than the Tony Hawk games. They basically mix elements from Sonic the Hedgehog, but let's make it into a Tony Hawk game, a 3D platformer, make grinding easier and even more innovative, had some kick-ass R&B style rock and roll soundtrack composed by Deki Nakamura, interesting and great character designs, and overall bizarre fun of this franchise and series. But unlike Panzer Dragoon Saga, the Panzer Dragoon series, this series only had 2 games in the series. There was going to be a third one, but of course Sega denied it. Now you may be wondering, hey, is L98, why is this company's very low? Team of Drama is your favorite. Hell, you like the Panzer Dragoon series, you even named your username based off one of the characters. Well, true, Team Andromeda is one of my favorite SEGA developers, but this isn't a SEGA developer I have personally close history due to nostalgia. But there's no deny that Team Andromeda and Smilebit makes the list. Coming in at number 2 is Sega AM2. Basically, Sega AM2 have been making Sega arcade games even long before Nintendo even happened, of course. These games were loud, they were cheesy, they were fast-paced, and they were fun. This company has a lot of history of making on-rails flying games and a bunch of racing games such as Afterburner, Space Harrier, Outrun, and of course the cult classic Daytona. Not only that, Sega AM2, just like Capcom back in the early to mid 90s, they start to let's say go into the fighting game business as well too. Yeah, sure, Sega did have games like we had games like Coliseum, Dark Edge, and Burning Rivals, and of course Eternal Champions to fill in the gap. But they played more like Street Fighter clones and Mortal Kombat clones, and games like Coliseum and Dark Edge did try to do a radical, let's say, bizarre thing in the fighting game genre by adding these 3D elements with the 2D sprites, but it fell. failed, of course, but Sega AM2 not only wanted to make a memorable fighting game that's equally on par with Street Fighter, but make it full on fucking 3D, and that game is the Virtual Fighter series, which is still going on today. But their biggest killer app is Shenmue, of course, taking what we already love from the first 3D adventure games, Grim Fandango. Shenmue basically expand upon it. If it wasn't for games like Shenmue, we wouldn't have games like Escape from Monkey Island, borrowing a lot of open world sandbox elements from the Grand Theft Auto games, and of course the sequel of The Longest Journey, Dreamfall: The Longest Journey for the Xbox, which borrows heavily a lot from Shenmue. And if it wasn't for Shenmue, we wouldn't have great beat-em-up gameplay from the Yakuza series, which is also a Sega AM2 series, which is going up to this day, all the way up to the PS4 days. So yeah, I nominate Sega AM2 to be number 2 on this list. You may be wondering, why is it not number 1? It's Yu Suzuki. He's basically the Shigeru Miyamoto of Sega. True, but there is one company I have the most history of, and not only that, I have lots to say about this particular developer. And my number 1 favorite Sega developer is the old Sonic team. Yeah, sure, I put Sonic Team on the list. And of course, people do say that they make a lot of Sonic games, but I cannot deny that the first game that I played back in the early Sega Genesis emulator back in 1997 in computer class was the first Sonic the Hedgehog game. But even then, when Sonic Team started to make their own company, before then they were just well known by Sega AM8, and they were there since the Master System days, of course. Their first game was basically the Alex Kidd series and, of course, Phantasy Star series, way back on the Master System. And you gotta thank this guy, Yuji Naka, yes, the creator of both series and Sonic the Hedgehog as a whole. So yeah, during the Master System days, they weren't very well known, of course, and they didn't branch out into their own company, just like Team Andromeda. However, just like Insomniac Games, Sonic Team wanted to branch out more, so they created Sonic the Hedgehog to compete with Mario, and of course, to make more of a badass platformer by adding a speed gimmick and momentum-based platforming into already exciting genre as it is. But even then, Sonic Team kept on going, not only just making Sonic games, but they made other non-related Sonic IPs. They kept on making the Phantasy Star series, such as the Lives of Phantasy Star 2, 3, and 4, of course. And then in the mid-90s, after the production of Sonic 3 and Knuckles, Sonic Team sort of branched out, and they wanted to make more IPs to make the Sega and Sonic Team brand recognizable. They made a platforming series that will rival the Kirby series, which is basically Rise Star, basically a star who's trying to save the universe and trying to save and protect his family from the evil, greedy Kaiser, of course. And they also made Nights into Dreams, which is basically a fantastic, unique on-the-rails flying game. Because most on-rails flying game, you're either piloting a plane or a spaceship, but just like the Panzer Dragoon series, this time you are playing as a dream jester, flying through rings, collecting blue chips, and protecting other dreamers and visitors from their nightmares from an evil Dream King called Wise Man the Wicked. And you gotta thank Satoshi Iizuka for creating this world. Hell, fun fact, before the game was even created, back in like 1995, Satoshi Iizuka became a therapist and go through the psyche of each of his patients' dreams and talked about it. And then after that, he just made the game. It's a darn shame that Satoshi Iizuka is ruining his best creations ever, besides Knuckles the Echidna. After they created Nights into Dreams, Sonic Team wanted to make a innovative, unique third-person shooter called Birding Rangers. Even though this game isn't mentioned at all in today's society, Birding Rangers was somewhat of ahead of its time. Yeah, sure, this game doesn't really have a soundtrack, but the gameplay was fast and innovative, and it was used. The gameplay was so great that Sonic Team used it again in the Sonic Adventure games for Gamma's gameplay and the mech shooting from Sonic Adventure 2, of course. Not only that, the world was more lively and interactive due to its complicated, complex story and layered characters that were in depth, like say Chris Parton, and of course Rita Recline, which she was a part of the space station that was about to crash towards Earth towards the end of the game. Who's the Echidna? But Sonic Team, they strived to go big in the late 90s and early 2000s by creating, of course, the first MMO RPG on consoles, which is basically Phantasy Star Online, which is still going up strong to this. Yeah, sure, this isn't the first MMO RPG to be on console. That was Dragon's Dream. Not to confuse with Dragon Force. But however, that game is sort of rare, hard, and expensive on the Sega Saturn. Not only that, that game barely came on retail stores. You had to win some sort of prize on the Sega Saturn magazine, and it depends on the NetLink adapter you brought with the Sega Saturn. However, seeing how the Dreamcast had built-in online, Sonic Team was ahead of its time at making these avatar-like characters jump into the world of Phantasy Star by fighting a bunch of cybernetic creatures and dragons alike. The game was so big that they continued to make the Phantasy Star series by making Phantasy Star Universe, which is somewhat of a semi-sequel to Phantasy Star Online, even though a lot of people had mixed bags towards it, especially when it came to the online capabilities and you had to pay for it. And of course, they kept on making portable Phantasy Star games that had Wi-Fi capabilities on your Nintendo DS. They made the sequel, Phantasy Star Online 2, which is sadly only in Japan and we're never going to see the light of day. However, while they were continuing making the Phantasy Star series, Sega wanted to make a unique 3D platformer called Billy Hatcher and the Giant Egg. Basically, think of if they mix a 3D platforming gameplay with Mario, but however had the gimmick of Super Monkey Ball by rolling down hills. Only you're not rolling downhill with a ball, you're rolling downhill with an egg. Sonic Team also made an Astro Boy game for the PS2 during the early 2000s based off that show. And of course, I cannot deny, when the Sonic games were good, Sonic Team put a lot of innovations and more creativity than any other series that was out there. I mean, hell, after all, people are still talking about the classic Sonic games and the early 3D Sonic platforming adventure games that were on the Dreamcast and GameCube. And it's a darn shame that this series has been hitting rock bottom since 2006. So yeah, Sonic Team is #1 on my list. It's too bad Sega and Sonic Team as a whole suck, because let's face it, they have been not making any good games as of lately.
Welcome to Sonic Team. We make games, I think. Aye, right. What the fuck is a Sonic?
So yeah, guys, this is my top 7 SEGA developers. Well, in conclusion, SEGA basically were the kings back in the 90s. Yeah, sure, there are a couple of SEGA developers like Rap who made the D series, which is produced by Kenji Nino, which he also helped co-develop Blue Stinger and of course Illbleed. But I don't want to make this list too long, and I was gonna do like an AK recommendations of my favorite developers from SEGA, but I want to end this video soon. You know, this company meant a lot when growing up, because, well, let's face it, I wasn't really a stickler with Nintendo. Yeah, sure, Mario and Kirby was great, but it soon got a little repetitive with their storytelling. You can say the same thing with the Zelda series, but at least they tried to make something new and different. There are a couple of games I like from Zelda, and then there are a couple of stinkers that were just bland and unforgettable. And the only thing that makes it worth a damn were some of the characters. But I will say, when they try to do something innovative and weird to the Zelda-like formula, at least it's something new and a different way to introducing new villains in the series, or a different way to reincarnate Ganon. It's not like in the Mario series where it's like, oh no, here's Bowser, oh no, he's kidnapping Peach, oh, there's Dedede trying to wreak havoc in Dreamland again. Yeah, sure, there are a couple of Nintendo franchises that do try to push the limit, but we barely get to hear about these Nintendo franchises. And even though I like some of them as a whole, I will not deny I gear mostly towards SEGA. You see, back in the late 80s, video games were starting out as a thing. And even though I love Capcom, I will admit, if you were living in the 80s right now, you wouldn't know if it was made by Capcom, especially with the games to the lives of Mega Man, Ryu from Street Fighter, and King Arthur from, let's say, Ghosts and Goblins and the Castlevania series, because you'll think, oh, it's on the Nintendo console. And this was way before, in the mid-90s, where companies, you know, show their logos everywhere during the beginning of the game when it's starting. But SEGA came around and just kicked the shit on Nintendo, because let's face it, in the late 80s, companies like Capcom and Konami, they were just basically like wannabes. Pretty much like how Luigi is to Mario. You didn't know if it was made by Nintendo or not, you just accepted. But then Sega came around, creating all these characters, such as, let's say, Sonic and Toe Jam and Earl, and they struck gold. Yeah, sure, during their early days, the Master System was doing a well success, but it didn't have that, let's say, appeal to both teens and adults during that time. Sega Genesis came out, yeah, it was new, but you gotta have something to market your toy or product during the time. It's when Sega started to make all these All-Stars characters, and later on, especially during the Dreamcast days, they made all these characters interact with each other, which made it great, you know, like how Cartoon Network did to their old bumpers and promo. And I like how Sega, during the 90s and early 2000s, had celebrity endorsement as well, too, to the lives of Michael Jackson, Data Plato, and heck, even Sergeant Lee Ernie.
This ought to light things up a little.
And heck, Sega's commercials were more edgier and more cooler than Nintendo's. After all, they tried to do some sort of scare tactic just to make you buy your consoles.
Hedgehog. Subject B. Evil Hedgehog.
If it's not the black guy pesterizing you while you're watching commercials just to get a Sega CD, it was damn sure Sega Sexual kicking your ass just to go play a Sega Saturn. But I will admit, even though Sega is shit today, I will say there are a couple of things that Sega have been doing as of recent. Yakuza is still around, kicking ass since the mid-2000s, since 2006. Phantasy Star is still a thing. Not only that, it has been about 14 years since Sega localized the Shining Force series, since Shining Force EXA, since it was on the PlayStation 2 back in 2007. Adventure Chronicles is looking to be probably one of the best well-known strategy RPGs, right next to Fire Emblem as of recent years. And hell, people and underground indie creators are beginning to start to work at Sega. Just look at Taxman Stealth, what they did to the Sonic series. They first remade some of the classic games, but then they made their own version of the classics with Sonic Mania. And that game is still going strong with a bunch of DLC, 2 playable characters, and hell, even a couple of shorts into. Speaking of creators, not only that, other Sega creators got their licensing to their characters, or just making their IPs more relevant again. How Greg Johnson is doing to the Toe Jam and Earl series, Yu Suzuki with Shenmue 3, and of course developer Lizard Bolt on creating the Wonder Boy 3 remake. The developers are thinking about remaking the whole series in the future. Of course, we do have Atlas, who are well known for making the Shin Megami Tensei series and Persona, and you know, seeing how Sega brought, let's say, 50% stock of their company, you can see more games from them on the PlayStation, which makes an interesting collaboration between Sega and Sony. Even though when Sega went third party, they worked mostly with Nintendo and Microsoft during that time. And of course, they are publishing the new Kings of Fighters games. Who knows? Sega might actually buy SNK, and I might have to buy their games in the future. Just makes you think. I will admit, not everything about Sega is great, but this is my favorite developer and game publisher of all time, right next to Capcom, Rare, and Insomniac Games. So let's just hope that the president of Sega is true to his word and is willing to make out brand new IPs and bring back the old IPs. I mean, after all, what kind of series would it be if you could play as a star, or let's say a robot made out of balls, a dream jester, or hell, a blonde guy who looks like Johnny Bravo jumps into his own comic. 2 series which takes place in the post-apocalyptic future where you have to defend off of Imperial force from blowing up the world, and way better than the Final Fantasy games in my opinion. It's nothing more than Sega. Just watching their commercials and looking at their slogan, "Welcome to the next level," really did make my pants exciting back in the day. So yeah, this is Zell98. See you guys next time.